Saving millions of lives, global vaccination programs are offering children a better start in life. But can funding keep pace with the will to vaccinate every child worldwide? And why aren't life-saving drugs cheaper? This is Inside Story. Hello there, welcome to the programme. I'm Shuli Ghosh. Now, it's universally recognised as one of the most successful and cost-effective health programmes in the world, immunising children against a range of diseases that can cause serious illness, disability or death. The World Health Organization estimates that immunisation prevents up to 3 million deaths every year. But it says an estimated 22 million children worldwide are missing out on basic vaccines. And the children's charity UNICEF says 4,000 children will die every day and many more will fall ill from diseases that can be prevented with a simple vaccination. Now there are warnings of a world at the crossroads when it comes to funding vaccination programmes. UNICEF says global efforts are levelling off as funding and political will declines. And the international medical and humanitarian organisation, Doctors Without Borders, is concerned that the high price of new vaccines could prevent programmes from being carried out in the future. Let's speak to our guests today. In Dubai, Kate Elder from Doctors Without Borders, and in New Jersey, Adil Mahmoud, a global health specialist at Princeton University and former president of Merck Vaccines. A warm welcome to both my guests. Kate, let's start with you first of all, because it is difficult to undersell the health benefits of immunisation programmes, isn't it? What has been the impact of these on public health?
Yeah, well, that's an excellent question. Absolutely. I mean, these tools, vaccines, are absolutely needed. They, as you said in the beginning, save 2 to 3 million lives every year, and there's still a huge amount of potential and many more lives that could be saved by vaccines. There are 22 million children each year that are being missed by basic vaccination services. That's 1 in every 5 children. And so it shows that while the global community has really made a huge amount of progress towards accelerating the introduction of these tools, particularly the new, most life-saving tools, we still have a long way to go to reach those remaining children. And these are places that MSF is working in. So we see this every day when we're vaccinating children ourselves. And the basic vaccinations you're talking about in developing countries are this package of 6 vaccinations, if not more, which are TB, diphtheria, tetanus, whooping cough, measles and polio. There are 11 immunizations that are recommended by the World Health Organization for every child. So you've named a couple of them. 2 that we should highlight, the 2 newest vaccines, PCV, pneumococcal conjugate vaccine against pneumonia, and rotavirus vaccine against diarrhea. Those are 2 of probably the most important vaccines in that package. Pneumonia and diarrhea account for about 1/3 of child deaths in developing countries. So accelerating their access and accessibility, particularly in the countries that are hardest hit by these diseases, is essential. Adele, let me bring you in here, because some major infections have been contained, haven't they, by using immunisation programmes. We've seen smallpox practically eradicated, and polio is now, I understand, affecting just 3 countries instead of the 125 countries that it used to be endemic in.
Correct. I mean, the success of vaccination over the years has really been tremendous, and I mean, unfortunately, you see a lot more successes in the developed world because of the penetration and the wide utilization of all the available vaccines. In contrast, as Kate is saying, when you look into the developing world, in spite of the fact that we have effective vaccines, I mean, we have had a vaccine for measles since the mid-60s. We still have between 200 and 300,000 children die from measles in sub-Saharan Africa. So the challenge is global. We have quite a lot of good vaccines that they can really manage and control a lot of the childhood infections. And some of them, in spite of the fact that they are cheap, they are available, they are accessible, are not being used properly for many, many reasons. I mean, one issue is one way of saying, well, the global effort, the global donor community ought to give money for vaccination. but we also have to look into what is the role of the national leadership of each of these countries. Do they care about their children and their future as much as they care about arms and nutrition and things like that? So
well, this is what the Global Alliance, the Gavi Alliance, the Global Alliance for Vaccines and Immunisation. That's what that was launched to deal with, wasn't it? To set up some kind of standardised programme of introducing vaccinations into these poorer countries.
Absolutely, but Gavi also is not an open-ended account. I mean, in a sense, Gavi from day one was designed along the lines: we will initiate, we will help, we will introduce, but they wanted to see that the national entities, the national governments, are also getting involved. And it is a spread. I mean, there are some governments, even in sub-Saharan Africa, that are shouldering the responsibility of taking part of the burden. Because Gavi is not just going to be an incredible funding mechanism that will go on and on and on, and the donors will keep supplying it with money. I mean, there has to be some sort of a balance between what Gavi can bring in, initiate, help introduction, and then the national entities, the national governments have to come into play here.
Okay.
Now, obviously, when we get into the pricing and so on, it will be another barrier, but it's something we can discuss.
Well, just before we go on with the discussion, let's tell our viewers about Gavi. So this is the Global Alliance for Vaccines and Immunisations. Now, this is a public-private partnership. It's backed by the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. It was launched in the year 2000 to increase immunisation in the world's poorest countries. Now, it works directly with vaccine manufacturers, the World Health Organization, and UNICEF, the World Bank, and individual countries. The alliance says donors have committed around $8 billion, and it has the potential to immunise an additional 245 million children by 2015. Kate, Gavi has done some fantastic work, but there is a concern there, as Adele has mentioned, about the high price of vaccines. Now, as I understand it, Gavi is able to negotiate lower prices on vaccines, but that doesn't benefit everyone. Just explain the problem.
Yeah, I mean, Gavi is an important mechanism. As you say, Gavi is the foundation that funds vaccines, the newest vaccines for the world's poorest countries. And Gavi has really had a lot of success in accelerating the introduction of these new life-saving tools into the countries that need them most. That's really important to recognize and to give credit to. Gavi does negotiate the price of these vaccines. And as was said before, when countries start on the path of what's called graduation, when they start to inherit these bills, there's high concern about the price that they're paying for these tools. Gavi plays that role directly with manufacturers, and when we're talking about affordability and how national governments can take responsibility, which they absolutely do need to do, to finance their immunization programs, we have to think about what are realistic costs and what price is affordable. When you look at the cost of the basic package of vaccines, it's increased by more than 2,700% over the past decade. 2,700%, and when you break that price down, it's really the two newest vaccines, that one against pneumonia and against diarrhea, that account for 70% of the cost of that package. So this is an alarming trend when you see how disproportionately more expensive these newest tools are, which are absolutely essential. We need them in the places where MSF works, and we have to be much more aggressive in making sure that we have more affordable prices, because these prices that are negotiated at the global level between Gavi and between vaccine manufacturers, those prices are being inherited by these countries. So we have to make sure that we're making them as low as possible. Absolutely. This is a matter of sustainability of immunization programs, not only for the countries themselves, it's also for the other actors like civil society that are delivering these services themselves.
Adele, why are some vaccines so expensive? I mean, Gavi's working with several big companies, including Merck, which is the company you used to be president of. Why are prices kept so high?
So let me just make a couple of comments before I get to that issue. I don't want to spend all the time debating the pricing, because we have cheap vaccines that are not being used. So, I mean, it's one thing to keep all the discussion around the price of the new vaccines. But why is the measles vaccine, why is the hepatitis B vaccine, which really costs cents, is not being used globally to immunize 80 or 90% of the birth cohort? I mean, so we need to be a lot more serious in the discussion that it is not just simply price. There are a lot of other barriers. Now,
okay, but can I just bring you back to one point, because Kate has made the point that it is the newer vaccines which are the most expensive, the pneumococcal and rotavirus vaccines, which are accounting for 75% of the total cost of the vaccination packages. I mean, is that a price that's going to come down? Is it because they're so new that they're so expensive?
Well, the price of those two vaccines compared with the way it is selling in the developed world is less than less than 10% of the total price in the developed world. So there are two trends that are very important to take into consideration. One is all the manufacturers, and I'm not specifically talking about Merck here, all the manufacturers of particularly the new vaccines, have negotiated phenomenally reduced pricing. I mean, it is less than 10% of the price of those vaccines in the developed world. Now, we have to appreciate that these are private entities that invested millions and if not billions of dollars. I mean, to get the rotavirus vaccine approved by the FDA, it needed a trial, a safety trial, after all the requirements of testing the vaccine, a safety trial that enrolled 70,000 infants in 11 countries. It went on for 4 years. Now, who bore the cost of that trial? It's the manufacturer. And the same thing happened to PSK. So it is very important to recognize the cost of the goods that we are dealing with.
Well, let me bring Kate in to answer that cost, because Kate, obviously price is a problem for you guys on the sharp end of it, but you know, it costs millions and millions of dollars to research and develop these medicines.
Absolutely. I mean, I want to go back to the point before that cost is a barrier. Yes, we absolutely agree that there are a range of obstacles to improving immunization access. I mean, 70% of those 22 million children are living in just 10 countries. These are countries where MSF is working and where we are vaccinating children and delivering other health services. So we really know how tough it is to work in these contexts. And then certainly I want to acknowledge that there's a range of reasons in terms of limiting accessibility, but cost is certainly a major consideration in that. You know, we have to consider that in considering the new price, the higher price of these new vaccines. I mean, this is not only an issue for countries that are inheriting the price, it's also an issue for MSF itself. Us having access to lower prices has actually become an issue. And in terms of our medical ambitions and meeting the health needs of our patients, price is certainly a barrier. So I want to acknowledge that. Secondly, kind of going on the point of how much does it cost to develop these new tools, sure, the new tools themselves are certainly complicated and cost money to develop. A lot of the initial research for these tools, however, is done in public institutions, so we should acknowledge that a huge amount of the R&D, the research and development costs, are actually borne by the public sector themselves, by taxpayer dollars. And the end price, at least for the countries that are receiving donor support, are also being paid for by taxpayer dollars, by large donor countries. So it's in our interest to make sure that we, get the most health for our buck and really maximize what we can purchase with donor funds. But specifically on that bit about the cost of developing vaccines, this is an area that we want to hone in on. I mean, we don't know how much it actually costs to develop these vaccines. There is no publicly available information on the true R&D costs and the cost to manufacture each dose of vaccine, which is desperately needed. So if we don't know the inputs of these costs and have a real sense of what are the parameters in terms of profit, and how much can you push to make these products more affordable, it's very difficult to know if we are actually getting a good deal. Sure, 90% off the price of PCV vaccine is great. That's a wonderful start. But 90% off a product which is already incredibly expensive and overpriced in developed countries still leaves a lot of room for further pushing on prices. So we need information, we need transparency of information to make sure that we're really getting the best deal and using taxpayers' dollars as efficiently as possible.
Well, there is one bit of good news, Kate, because the chief executive of the pharmaceutical giant GlaxoSmithKline said last month that drugs prices should fall in future because of more efficient research and development. Andrew Whitty said it was actually a myth that each new drug costs $1 billion to develop. He said if you stop failing so often, you massively reduce the cost of drug development. It's why we are beginning to be able to price lower. It's entirely achievable that we can improve the efficiency of the industry and pass that forward in terms of reduced prices. Well, Kate's smiling over that. Adele, Kate makes the point, and it is quite hard to see why vaccines cost what they do, because manufacturers are deliberately vague about research and development costs and the price of manufacturing drugs, aren't they?
Well, I mean, I don't want to get into and continue with this discussion because we are rehashing
just a little bit more of discussion, Adele. I'm interested because I know that you led the effort to develop 4 new vaccines. So, in terms of cost, can you tell us how much that cost?
We're just claiming that all these vaccines came from public support and public funding is just a little bit unrealistic and untrue. Just take rotavirus vaccine. That was a discovery that was very preliminary in a university. And it was given to Merck, and it took 10, 12 years to develop. And when the previous vaccine that another company was producing failed because it caused interception, Merck had to go shut the production facility that was producing the vaccine and do a trial for 70,000 infants in 11 countries. I don't want to make this the total case for discussing pricing, but we have to understand the complexity of the process. This is a vaccine rotavirus vaccine, for example, is made of 5 separate vaccines. The pneumoconjugate, Merck doesn't make the pneumoconjugate, is made of 13 separate vaccines. So we just have to appreciate the complexity of the process. It's one thing to keep talking about pricing when the companies reduce the price for the procurement by UNICEF by at least 90% during the time the vaccine was produced in 5 years. So it's not, the companies have not recovered yet the cost of producing these vaccines. I think they are coming to be players in the global field, and we have to appreciate that. Okay, and it's still the issue here for those who talk about pricing. Why is hepatitis B vaccine, which costs 12 cents a dose, is not being used by 100% of the birth cohort? Why is the measles vaccine that is cost less than 10 cents is not used by the total birth cohort? So
what is the answer to that, Kate? Why aren't much cheaper versions of vaccines being used then?
Well, as I said before, yeah, it's certainly a range of issues that are hindering access to immunization. That's indisputable. It's not only about price. MSF is investing a lot of our own internal resources into dealing with the consequences of measles outbreaks all over the world. We are responding to measles outbreaks right now in Syria. We're responding to measles outbreaks in Nigeria and in Niger. So absolutely, there is a range of reasons of why access to immunization is still quite difficult, and we have a lot of work to do. But I think it's important to talk about the pricing issue as well, simply because that is part of the package. Let's look at the vaccines which have had success in reducing the price, and let's look at some of the factors that have contributed to that. And bringing up measles vaccine, measles is about 25 cents a dose, which is very affordable. And what's contributed to being able to have those price decreases is a healthy vaccine market. Indeed, there are huge inputs that the pharmaceutical company are contributing. Yes, there are definitely costs borne by them, but in order to have prices come down, you need healthy competition. And one aspect of healthy competition is having multiple manufacturers in the market. For these two newest vaccines, which are most expensive, there's only 2 manufacturers that make each of them. I mean, in fact, the global vaccine market, which is worth $25 billion and is very healthy and growing substantially, it's growing at a rate of 10 to 15% each year and is projected to reach a value of $100 billion by 2025. 90% of the revenues in the vaccines market are won by just 5 pharmaceutical companies. So if in terms of, you know, having a healthy manufacturer base,
they're the ones that can afford to spend the money on the research and development in producing these vaccines in the first place.
Right, exactly. It takes capital costs to develop vaccines, certainly. And that's why we need the entities that are buying these vaccines to make sure that we're contributing to a healthy market and facilitating the entrance of other manufacturers. We see when more manufacturers enter the arena that prices decrease. We've seen this across other diseases as well. That let's just use the HIV antiretrovirals experience as an example. Originally, it cost more than $10,000 a year per patient per year to treat them with ARVs with the originator companies. As more generics came online, the price started to decrease rapidly, and over 10 years we achieved a 99% decrease. We can now treat people with HIV for $100 a year, and that is, you know, a characteristic of a broad manufacturer base. So as the public community is paying for these vaccines for the most poor countries, they should be demanding as well that we create an environment which is helping new manufacturers to come online. And there are different ways to do that: technology transfer, volume guarantees, assuring that there will be a market for when other manufacturers come in, are just 2 examples of how we can stimulate the entrance of other manufacturers, particularly manufacturers that can produce these vaccines for less costs, how we bring them in so that we really establish competition and drive down the price.
OK, let's have a look at one of the Gavi Alliance's latest successes, the launch this week of a new 5-in-1 vaccine in Somalia. The pentavalent vaccine protects against diphtheria, tetanus, whooping cough, hepatitis, and the bacteria that cause meningitis, pneumonia, and other illnesses. More than 1 million doses are being delivered this year, and vaccines will then be provided for the 400,000 or so children born each year. Adele, let's talk about the other end of the problem. So away from pricing, the problem is getting the funding, continuing to get the funding from donor countries. Do you think the momentum can be sustained?
Yes and no. I mean, it's probably sustained as long as Gavi demonstrate success in introducing and maintaining the higher vaccination rate in the target countries. I mean, in some ways, Gavi's success historically between 2000 and 2005 with the introduction of hepatitis B is actually the reason Gavi got more money and is developing new programs. So in some ways, Gavi's success is absolutely linked to its ability to raise more money. Now, the question is, the global community raising money for global health in general has got some fatigue. I mean, there is donor fatigue. And in spite of the high value, the high cost effectiveness of vaccines, I just want to see that there are other entities that come into play so as we can maintain a very healthy global vaccine market and global vaccine introduction and coverage. And my only plea here is the national entities have to start shouldering some of that responsibility. I mean, there is no question. There are multiple other factors. I mean, just one other factor that is important, the involvement of the middle income country manufacturers, you know, like India, like Indonesia, Korea, Israel, and Brazil, is really changing the way the market is shaped up.
Do you think the political will is there?
The political will in some of the receiving countries, very, very few has that political will, unfortunately.
Very quickly, last word to Kate, because I'm so sorry we are running out of time. Do you agree with that, Kate?
I think there certainly needs to be more political will from national governments, absolutely. Their priority should be the public health of their people, but it's also the global community that supports them, and these governments are the ones that are inheriting the prices that are decided in capitals of countries of the North. So we have to make sure that not only, one, do countries take more responsibility for the health of their own people, but we as the global community make sure that they're getting the best deal to help them facilitate that.
Well, that has been a fascinating discussion. Thank you very much indeed to my guests, Kate Elder and Adel Mahmoud. So what do you think? Email us your thoughts at insidestory@aljazeera.net. I'm Shuli Ghosh. Thanks for watching.